Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. In this class, we will review the national import and export regulation. So, the printout delivered will indicate chapter 6, you see, and through the subtitle, as you will see in the projection, the titles, I just instantiated about the topic, so I'm not sure if there was some critical error about the spelling or this. Is it okay? Sorry to be unprepared in advance. And I also prepared 5 copies. The practice about all students. Can you share and may as peer student duplicate, or otherwise you may come to my office. There's copies. So, in this class, you consider a kind of a practically important aspect of process in the import and export activities of business people. As you see, most jurisdictions have a domestic system about import and export activities. There's so many regulations in the form of statute or a customs regulation in practice would impact the feature of a transaction, and also would in most cases pivotal in yielding a high commercial interest. So the scrupulous business people would consider this scope of regulations in advance about the ways to reduce the incidental cost in most effective way. So as you see, the nation often maintains a scope of import requirements. For example, import license in some context. As you see in the U.S. system, general license of export, or individual basis of a specific license case. And often they also require to make a statement about a ultimate consignment and purchase. So it is designed to serve a specific national goal and a purpose. For example, banning of a dangerous weapons to the foreign country. So export control of a scope of a contraband or arms need to be checked up in advance by national authority. And also a drug trafficking is one of a sensitive international attention in which affects the system of export and import regulations. For example, general system of preference, which favors a deductive tariff rate for vulnerable countries, would incorporate one factor from the kind of consideration. So a growth per capita national income is a critical factor to divide between the preferred status of a country and other normal relations of trade. So $8,500 would be that element required by law to for the preferred status in terms of a tariff rate. However, a drug trafficking company and the countries against the due respect of intellectual property of United States and other a role state, for example, a embroiled into nuclear controversy, North Korea, Iran, would be excluded from the scope of a preferred status in the United States. GSP was instituted in the initiative of a UNCTAD, and the organ often would be considered to support the business national development underdeveloped countries. And they try to implement the system outside of the scope of duties and obligations. So the initiative need to incorporate some of a discrimination measure against developed countries. As you see, it comes in the kind of a formative action for underdeveloped countries. There is also reverse discrimination, which contradicts the promise of a WTO terms. For example, more favored nation treatment and domestic treatment would be impaired if a preferred treatment would be allowed. However, you see the kind of a substantive justice about the underdeveloped countries. It often approach in also a philosophical point of deliberation. For example, you see a John Rawls work about the legitimacy of aid of grants, international aid of grants to boost national economy. You see Vero Vignorance, which espoused to explain the justice and equality among countries and subsets also. In any case, the program about a general system of preference actually eventualized utilizing the waiver clause. And so weighty majority vote in the program as permissible. And under system, European Union and United States and other countries enacted corresponding statute of domestic nature in compliance with the international agreement, GSP. And also, we have the concept about a graduation clause, which pertains to notably the case of South Korea and Singapore. Now we are now not in the ambit of a GSP. However, it still is an extant institution to boost many underdeveloped countries. And the context of a discussion would be followed. And also, one important concept you need to know about trade regulation is the identical product or some same product kind of concept. And in this line of legal authority, you are advised to concept general rules of interpretation and harmonize a tariff system. And how classified goods is a threshold issue that the trade regulators would face in most priority. So it is ultimate factor to implement a trade system, trade policy. For example, country of origin is one factor you need to be aware. If you are a trade officials to decide whether to impose a tax amount. If the country of origin is found about Canada or Mexico, which is a member state of NAFTA, would entitle the import untaxed, out of tax. So that is important, how to decide the country of origin. And upon this determination, the goods are expected to bear a proper marking about the origin of country, for example, made in the United States or others. And failure to comply with the marking requirement would incur some of a criminal penalties, for example, or fines or others. In some cases, you need to know there is more severe penalty. For example, willful misconduct or wanton disregard of a legal requirement, for example. And notably, you see what I call a ground zero. So there are a catastrophic event for the U.S. case, and also some of a universal response against terrorism, and also the United States has taken a great initiative about its homeland security. So they created a new institution, Department of Homeland Security, and controls the matters comprehensively about the affairs which potentially affects the security of the United States. And that is also a factor which influenced the revision of a custom authority in the United States. For example, formerly the customs office would be changed in nomenclature and its scope of power to the Bureau of Customs and Border Protection. As you see in the name, a ultimate responsibility was ascribed to a new organ, what we call Department of Homeland Security. And the U.S. Customs was formerly housed within the Department of Treasury. However, the institutional framework and division and change it to report directly to a Department of Homeland Security. And also the department, our principal organ to control other bureaus and services. For example, Department of Agriculture is partially related or in authority and responsibility with that department, and also the Immigration and Natural Service are expected to interact with a Department of Homeland Security to ensure a security purpose. And also the U.S. Border Control is one branch to ensure a homeland security. And so you see in Exhibit 6.1, access to a harmonized tariff schedule, what we call in abbreviation HETS. So it is a national code to classify the goods in purpose of the import and export regulation. And also you see a international context of this this program administered by the World Customs Organization. It is responsible to provide an international classification scheme. So how to classify the goods is very important in terms of a trade policy and regulation. And that concept offers the basis to decide the adequate tariffs. And also in a couple of a tariff rate conceded in advance by member states here. For example, you see in the WTO case, and also you see later the importance of valuation of goods, which would be a basis by being multiplied with tariff rates, which eventually produce the tariff amount specific countries would impose. And often the tariff issue is a primary concern in the traditional trade relation, and still bears importance since the transaction of goods, despite the emerging feature of a service trade, constitutes a primary account of international trading amount. So a tariff is a primary concern. And also you see the non-tariff impediment, which surfaced very seldomly in 1970s, around we talked around in a process or a series of a decadal multilateral convention on trade, and some technical regulation and standard also factor to interact with the idea of a trade liberalization. So how to define the national regulation encompassed with the ideas, and also the needs of a specific state is important concern, and a prime structure the international trade is concerned, and also jurors and other trade policymakers have to see this dynamism. Then, how to classify the goods? In that purview, we see two important rules, which are a rule of a specificity and essential character of good. So, as for its importance, we have a number assigned to each product from a general to specific. And if the product bears I-digit number, then it would be classified as a more specific, and also deserves a legal status in that form. And the rule of specificity requires the use of a heading that provides a more specific description of the good over one that gives a more general description. The concept comes rather similar, as you see in the legal interplay about different norms. The specific rule often prevails general principle. defining, the classification of goods comes in the same context. And also the essential character of good is one rule to classify the goods. So if neither description is considered more specific, then the heading for the material, component, or function that provides the essential character of good is to be used. Terms contained within the HTS are to be given the common and popular meaning unless the commercial meaning was clearly intended. So, in case rollerblade versus United States, you see this aspect of problem about the classification of goods. So, called shape the rule to prefer common and proper meaning. We'll later come back to see the essence of the code ruling. And you can order 3 cases, which will be later done. And the national import and export regulations involved in assessment of duties. So classification of the goods being imported is the first step. And the technical authority needs to evaluate the goods. And we have 4 criteria to be applied to the assessment, the evaluation of the goods. The concept in most first priority would be a transaction value. See? And unless otherwise found, transaction value of similar goods would come secondary to be alternative against the first method. So that is a complementary with the first rule. And also the secondary method may fail in some cases, then deductive value method will be applied to decide the price of goods. Of course, it is the process to produce a eventual amount of a tariff for each item. Finally, the national laws and WTO agreement recognize the least method, which often is detested by trade policymakers and industrialists, the computed value. However, in some context of United States jurisdiction, the computed value may be misappropriated to impose a anti-dumping penalty or others. That is occasionally raised one of a disgruntlement from international orders. And customs valuation also dealt in somewhat universal nature involving the European Union. EU regulation 2913 versus 92 as amended established the European Union Customs Code, which bases the valuation of imported goods on the notion of a transaction value or price actually paid. So Article 29 provides the transaction value must be adjusted for any proceeds or subsequent sales that are remitted to the buyer, to the exporter, directly or indirectly. And Article 32 provides a list of types of charges that must be included in transaction value. Customs value includes the costs of packing, a commission and brokerage and royalty and license fees. Items that are not included in custom valuation include freight charges, charges incurred subsequent to import, buying commissions, charges for construction, erection, assembly, maintenance, and technical assistance, and finance charges. But these items are excludable only if they are separately listed and actually paid. So European Union is one of a largest bloc economy, and some integrity may be established in instituting a trade system. For example, a tariff, a single tariff structure provides rules for determining whether an import license is required for a particular good. As you see later, the European Union also enacted a CE system, or CE mark. It is an umbrella level which warrants that the good bearing the mark meets all relevant EU directives relating to health, safety, and environmental protection for that type of product. So it is termed as a comprehensive scheme to regulate a cumbersome and often fragmented rules about marking and marking requirement and other license, import or export license. So it may facilitate in many aspects the businesses of a global market. And also EU once instituted, implemented an equitable system. The product, which was fixed with an equitable, is awarded, has some power to demonstrate as a standard of environmental friendly. So it was awarded by the European Union to producers who can show that the products are significantly less harmful to the environment than similar products. Several products are eligible for equitable, including a cleaning products, dishwashers, a footwear, a personal computers, a televisions, textiles, and washing machines. And also, this area of concern involves the standard requirements that can be applied to the context of NAFTA. And some of incongruence may be found among now 4 states in NAFTA. For example, technical sharing may be available only between Canada and the United States. You see, in the context of Mexico, the United States has not been as successful in harmonization of its standards, unlike the Canadian case. In contrast, Canada and the United States have developed joint standards in several areas. For example, the Canadian Standards Association and the U.S. Air Conditioning and Refrigeration Institute have harmonized performance requirements for air conditioners and numerous types of heat pumps. For the case of Mexico, poorly drafted regulations, inadequate communication between responsible government agencies, and the lack of transparency have created barriers to the entry of U.S. products into Mexican marketplace. And also, you see some of a trend about a country of origin regulation. For example, in conjunction with the origin agreement, the WTO Technical Committee on Rules of Origin and WTO Committee on Rules of Origin have been established to interpret the rules. As I've introduced, the rule of origin is a national norms which operates to determine the country of origin for a specific product. And often the national jurisdiction disagrees how to determine the country of origin involving a specific product. And that is the point. And upon the inauguration of a WTO organization, we have successfully launched the ambition about a unified rules about determining a country of origin. The treaty, what you call agreement on rules of origin within WTO has been tempered to bridge toward a more ambitious, a substantive unified code of rule of origin. So it dominantly includes some of a procedural requirement to that ambition, and has the nature of a temporary operation in time. However, actually, that effort would be baffled in many reasons, and also still controversial about the involved countries. Then, what is the reasonable and proper ways of approach to this very autonomous nature of our rules? Let's consider the U.S. case, and which would be very powerful to penetrate most of jurisdiction. The principle who espouse is the concept of substantial transformation. It is considered the primary test in country of origin determination, and it is the one adopted in the U.S. law. In this approach, the country of origin is the last country in which a good or product was substantially transformed. A substantial transformation occurs when a product is changed into new or different product. For example, if a good had changed from a produced good to consumer good, a substantial transformation has occurred. So, suppose if the product was manufactured in intention to be on use for a producer, U.S. producer, then the final form or product as imported in the borderline or through the borderline of U.S. customs airline determines whether it satisfies a substantial transformation requirement. So it is also related with a marking requirements, and the requirement commands to bear the mark that the ultimate purchaser may easily identify the country of origin. So it is not independent among each other between marking requirements and also country of origin. And the ultimate purchaser in that case would be a U.S. producer. So the strict variable in this case is the U.S. Producer could discern the marks born in the product. However, the product may be transformed to the use of a second purchaser who was consumer. Then the case develops in a rather different way. As you see, so custom regulation define the ultimate purchaser as the last person in the United States who will receive the article in the form in which it is imported. Therefore, if the imported item is used in the manufacturing process, then the manufacturer is the ultimate purchaser. The manufacturing process must result in a substantial transformation of the article for this to be the case. If the identity of article remains essentially the same after the manufacturing process, then the user or consumer who used the article after the process is regarded as the ultimate purchaser. The Tariff Act provides a severe punishment, including fines and imprisonment for anyone destroying, removing, altering any mark required under the Act. In addition, anyone importing a marked items is subject to civil penalties, including an additional 10% ad valorem duty. So, you see the context of complicacies among two norms, and also some criminal or civil sanction would be related to perplex many business people potentially. So it is wise to see the exact way the norms operate among each other, and also be cautious to respond with the marketing requirements and others. Also, what is the concept of substantial transformation? It is a principle to be tested in deciding a country of origin. It has been defined as transformation in which a good is manufactured into new and different article, having a distinctive name, character, or use from that of the original article. Factors often utilized in applying this test include whether the good went through a tariff classification change. So tariff classification may work to see country of origin. It is the most official way to define the nature and quality of a specific product. So it comes into one factor. And the irreversibility of transforming process and the length of time that it will last, the amount of value added because of transformation, and the complexity of processing operation. So it is the factors and circumstances the trade officials and court should see to decide the country of origin. And also, the statute may vary in defining the country of origin in the aspect that the statute is designed to meet a specific policy goals or purpose. So you need to be scrupulous about its definition, which can vary according to each statute or regulation. An alternative method to determine country of origin is to perform a value-added analysis. So it is one way to deal with this problem. The value-added test is based on the use of percentage, either of the value added or percentage of component parts coming from imported materials to determine the country of origin. Used in the European Union, this method was adopted under NAFTA for goods transported from one NAFTA country to another NAFTA country of origin. Goods use the value-added test as part of a multi-step approach, depending on type of products being imported. In general, non-regional materials or components need to be sufficiently transformed to result in tariff classification charges. So, eventual outcome in determining country of origin would not be significantly different from a substantial performance transformation test. So in some areas, not only do non-regional goods have to be substantially transformed, but also the final end product needs to contain a specified percentage of regional content. The value-added percentage applied under NAFTA varies according to type of good. Automobiles, for example, are required to have regional content equal to 62.5% or more of NAFTA originating materials and labor. A number of problems are associated with a value-added method. So often the nation and a regional compact about economic integration may favor the portion of materials and labor. So may set a strict requirement about high number percentage about that would be posed in your experience. That context also comes similar in European Union. Of course, that has some policy strengths in terms of justice. As you see, the multinational corporations often exploited the multi-locations of factories and others. So they have many evasive operation, which should be condemned in view of global justice in the economy. Also economic justice. However, that may have a chilling effect about the exploitation of global resources and sufficiencies. However, the context of dilemma or the range of a scope of our concern, for example, International Labour Organization also see some of dynamism within with the international trade, for example, like prison labor, child labor, and excessively deprived condition of workers. The kind of high standard may not be available permissibly, since the national capacity of economy could grossly insufficient to satisfy the requirement. However, some moderate form of standard may be contemplated to be on universal effect of this area. So that would constitute a virtually new WTO agenda. You see in a green noun, for example, which responds with the environmental challenge, and also anti-corruption convention or national policies were once introduced about foibles we often business encounter in cases, and also a competition round was long pursued to restore a fair fairness and some of a just playing field. You see what a level playing field, and or in complementation from justice. And we have another test to determine the country of origin. What is a specified process test? But this method is not considered universal and of limited use. So it expresses lists types of processes or operations that are considered to confer country of origin status. However, as said, and it has been used in piecemeal fashion, primarily by the European Union, Japan, Norway, and Switzerland to target a certain product. The final method of origin determination is a change in tariff classification approach. The test bases country of origin status upon any change in a product that results in a change in its tariff classification. Tariff classifications are almost universally affixed with the harmonized commodity description and a coding system. This classification system has been enacted in the United States in the harmonized tariff schedule. The most recent attempt at harmonizing country of origin rules is the Agreement on Rules of Origin of GATT. This agreement adopts a change in tariff classification as the primary method to determine origin. And also for the importers and exporters, I present two concepts which is practically useful to calculate the yield of commercial transactions, international transactions. One concept is bounded warehouse and other foreign trade zone. So goods placed in the government bounded warehouse are not subject to duties until they officially enter into country. So geopolitically, the bounded warehouse and a foreign trade zones are domestic territory, which is economically international in character. So the foreign exporters may exploit this zone to assemble or re-export or process the necessary requirements to export, and also manufacturing substantially even in this job. So the goods placed in a foreign trade zone would not be imposed tariffs. A bounded warehouse is more limited in scope than the free trade zone. And duties differ until the goods are formally entered into United States commerce. But manufacturing is not permitted unless the goods are subsequently exported. So both concepts share a similar elements with minor exception. So bounded warehouse are viewed in limited context of operation. Foreign trade zones, free ports, and similar customs privileged facilities now in operation in almost every country. So it is one national strategy to boost the foreign trade zone, particularly for the underdeveloped countries and developing countries. So, that is often a point that the business person consider to make the investment and transactions. U.S. regulations define a foreign trade zone as an restricted access area in or adjacent to custom port of entry. Custom duty is not due when goods enter into the foreign trade zone, only when they enter the commerce of the United States. The importer pays customs on the lower value of finished goods after assembly or manufacturing the zone or of the exported parts and components. So in terms of a tariff purpose, it could be a useful system. Business person needs to be attentive. And also a port-to-port concept of a tariff administration has been extensively remodeled in a modernized context of U.S. trade regulation, as you see, and the United States now enforced very national uniformity of a trade system. So universal principle and terms or other polish element would be imposed, notwithstanding each location of a trade goods or others. Bonded warehouse are also found in many locations. The goods can be warehoused without duties being assessed. Once goods are released, they are subject to duties. An importer may use a free trade zone to assemble or manufacture product from imported components to take advantage of duty preferences or store finished products in a bonded warehouse for a period of time if the importer expects duty rates to decrease. So you see in Act.EDU.19, often 30 and 5%, 30 and 45% are most of race in this column. You see the race as high as 90% in tariff act of 19, Persian to tariff act of 1930. And these exorbitant rates are meant to punish an exporting country and effectively prevent the importation of goods from the country. These rates also demonstrate the importance of normal trade relation status. The number indicates, most saliently, the status of trading countries. And you see in 4 section, the title section 9A02. The pertinent case in this discussion would be Samsonite Corporation versus United States, decided in 1989. In that case, core rule, a section 982, which allows importers to deduct the value of assembly from a duty assessment. The exemption is given for articles assembled abroad in whole or in part or fabricated components that are products of the United States. It also extends the exemption to any advancement in value or improvements in condition that is a result of operations incidental to the assembly process, such as cleaning, lubricating, and painting. This exemption has resulted in creation of a corridor of assembly plants, popularly known as maquiladoras, along the U.S.-Mexican border. Excuse me, can you kindly close the door? Close the door. It disrupts the class. Thank you for your assistance. So maquiladoras is very popularly known item along the U.S.-Mexican border. A maquiladora or inbound industry allows foreign importers to ship components into Mexico duty-free assembly and re-export. The key issue of contention between customs and importers is definition of fabrication. What is concept of fabrication? So it is a stressful matter to decide duty exemption and involving a free trade zone and also warehouse concept. Customs successfully challenges an importer's deduction for the value of assembling luggage in Mexico. Still, strips were produced in the United States and then sent to the company's assembly plant in Mexico. The case involved the deductibility of the cost of the steel strips upon importation into the United States. The court agreed with the Customs Service to shaping the steel strips before placing them within the luggage constitute a photo fabrication and not mere assembly. So it disqualifies the item from a duty exemption. See. And the business people also need to have awareness about drawback of a custom duty. So more concerns and awareness in this area of trade regulation and basic information is very pivotal about the commercial interest. And also now electronic system is fairly well organized and provided to business people. You see in many useful public websites, often shaped by U.S. government and other branches pertinent to that program or project or governance area. Helpful, you see. So drawback is a form of tax relief in which lawfully collected custom duty is refunded or remitted wholly or in part because of particular use made of the commodity on which the duty was collected. U.S. firms that import materials or components that they process or assemble for re-export may obtain drawback refunds of all duties paid on the imported merchandise. That's 1% to cover a customs cost. This practice encourages U.S. exports by permitting exporters to complete in foreign markets without the handicap of including in the sales prices the duties paid on imported components. The U.S. Trade and Tariff Act of 1984 revised and expanded drawbacks. Under existing regulations, several types of drawback have been authorized, but only 3 are of interest to most manufacturers. The first is First, if articles manufactured in the United States by using imported merchandise are exported, then the duties paid on the imported merchandise used may be refunded as a drawback. Second, if both imported merchandise and domestic merchandise of the same kind and quality are used to manufacture articles, some of which are exported, then duties paid on the imported merchandise are refundable as a drawback, regardless of whether the merchandise was used in the exported article. So the ambit program would expand very positively, even including the kind of domestic context. Finally, if articles of foreign origin imported for consumption are exported from the United States or are destroyed under a supervision of customs within 3 years of date of importation in the same condition as when imported and without being used in the United States, then duties paid on the imported merchandise are refundable as a drawback. Incidental operations on the merchandise, such as testing, cleaning, repacking, or inspection, are not considered uses of the item. To obtain drawback, the United States firm must file a claim at a custom port office with the drawback unit. The claim and all supporting documentation generally must be filed within 3 years of exportation or destruction of the goods. And also, what is the concept? The dutiable materials. And also, what context the quota restrictions would be imposed involving U.S. foreign trade zones is important topic you need to be aware of. It is a principal avenue to an instrumentality to impose a quota restrictions. You see, the quota restrictions is one way to deal with a trade sanction from the United States, and also one way to protect the vulnerable domestic industry in terms of what we often call a safeguard measure. And you see, the quota restriction is very difficult in terms of a universal application nationally. So once the time limit also considered to be critical about the specific requirement imposed in quota restrictions. And also you see the concept was dealt involving the gut provision for the three important principles would be what a MFNT, most favored nation treatment, and national treatment, and also the restriction of quantity of goods. Both concepts would be designed to facilitate a trade liberalization, free trade ideas. So quota restrictions in ways of principle contradict the WTO covenant. However, there would be many bases to legitimate the quota restrictions. For example, notably a general exception clause, and also other legal ground to lift the ban of WTO duties or obligations. And the class of this is a trade measure often called a safeguard measure in officially, and other VERs, what term meaning. Voluntary export restraints or orderly market arrangement, OMAs, kind of varying types of trade regulations, which could not find an exact match with the WTO provisions, had long been practiced in 1980s and 1990s. Quota restrictions often arose from the context, and a main feature to enforce that an official or gray area measure, which is inevitably requires a kind of a uniform dealings in law. So we institute now a safeguard agreement on safeguard measure in the context of WTO. So the national import or export regulations need to be considered in a twin process and also a comparative viewpoint with a WTO laws, you see. And often the major regulations have a counterpart in the form of a multilateral trade agreement, MFN, called obligation. And also often important source and information business people need to be good comprehension, need to have a good comprehension. About marking requirements, the statute was specified in section 304A of Tariff Act of 1930. It states that every article of foreign origin imported into the United States shall be marked in a conspicuous place in such a manner as to indicate to an ultimate purchaser the English name of the country of origin. Civil actions pertaining to marking requirement are heard in the Court of International Trade. So this court is on the federal rank and the work division to respond with a dispute involving international trade. There are exceptions to the marking requirements, for example, goods that are incapable of being marked, such as crude substances, goods goods, and goods not native to the United States. They need not be marked. So some scope of goods could be excluded. The key issue in determining the type of making necessary to comply with the Act is defining the ultimate purchase. And marking requirements vary widely from country to country. NAFTA, for example, includes a number of marking provisions. Formulas are provided to determine whether a good was produced in a NAFTA country in order to take advantage of the lower tariff rates between the United States, Canada, and Mexico. The labeling of a product regarding its country of origin may mean a different thing, depending on the law or the test being applied. The use of the label made in the USA may vary depending on the appropriate regulations. NAFTA defines something made in a left country, whether in the United States, Canada, or Mexico, as something in which at least 5% of the labor and component parts was supplied by a NAFTA country. In contrast, the U.S. Federal Trade Commission says that the made in the U.S. label should be used in advertising only when the product is whole or in substantial part of a domestic origin. And a most notable trend in what a 20 new millennium would be sorry, it was enacted in 1993. In 1990s, would be the customs modernization and informed compliance act. So what is this act? It has implemented a number of changes to U.S. customs law. So the concept of changing in fundamental basis that the customs was not the primary responsible actor. Rather, legal responsibility in these areas is now entirely upon the importer of the goods. So, how to classify and value imported products is no longer the agonizing problem that the customs official endeavor. So it falls within each importer, exporter. Of course, other measures to support this change would be made extensively about imposition of high penalties in case of a violation. So the importer is on the duty of reasonable care to correctly classify and value the goods being imported. So you now in 11 titled Customs Modernization. This duty cannot legally be delegated to customs broker. So ultimate party to be responsible with a classified value imported products remains still in the party, importer. He may employ a customs broker to facilitate this transaction, but he is not legally responsible. The importer remains liable for any misclassification or undervaluation. The necessity of accuracy on the part of the importer in the classification and valuation of products cannot be overstated. U.S. law provides that the importer who fails to exercise reasonable care to ensure the accuracy of disclosures with respect to these variables in its important documentation may be penalized in an amount equal to twice the loss duty. But it could not exceed the item price of item. And culpability also operates to increase this penalty. For example, more gross context of negligence or willful violation would merit the case to be multiplied in terms of penalty. So, no duty was lost as a result of misstatement, an amount of up to 10% of the dutyable value of the goods. Penalties for more serious misconduct are substantially higher. So, for example, an importer who acts in a gross, negligent manner, or in wanton disregard of the accuracy of disclosure with respect to these variables may incur penalties in an amount double to those imposed for merely negligent conduct. And also a criminal penalty could be imposed, up to 2 years in prison for each violation. And other important responsibility, which however is secondary, is to implement a proper record-keeping system. So now, upon the requirement of this act, the importer is obliged to keep the record in compliance with the manner of act. Although U.S. law requires customs to determine the duties to be assessed or imposed, the process known as liquidation within 1 year of the entry, importers are required to maintain records of import transactions for 5 years after entry and produce such documents to customs on demand. Failure to maintain adequate records to substantiate the importer customs declarations can result in a substantial penalties. Willful violations are punishable by fines equal to the less of $100,000 or 75% of the value of the merchandise. Negligent failure to comply with the record-keeping requirement is punishable by a fine equal to the less of $10,000 or 40% of the value of the import. And also the act shows other interesting invention, development and implementation of the automated commercial environment. The current customs import system, the automated commercial system, was designed in 1948. Customs determined that it began work on AC in August 2001. Development and implementation of ACE, automated commercial environment, became more urgent with customs increased responsibilities as a result of its reorganization and relocation within the Department of Homeland Security. When fully implemented, ACE will provide the international trade community, including customs officials, importers, distributors, and financial institutions, with an integrated and fully automated information system to collect, process, and analyze import and export data. So ACE goals include greater efficiency and lower cost in the entry of goods into the United States, as customs ends a port-by-port processing program. And according to customs, ACE will enhance border security, increase access to data, reduce paperwork, increase the flow of trade, simplify and expedite the release of cargo, and provide interested parties with convenient online access to data. So you see in Action 6.2, an overview of ACE's operation upon its implementation. What is ACE and how it operates in a comprehensive viewpoint. So very smart to see the nature of ACE in operation. And also this development is owed very much to the e-technology. And you see in the last week's international symposium, a very useful introduction about trends in U.S. corporations law. Professor Walton, have you attended the symposium? Interesting. His main argument is that ULLE, an incorporated limited liability entity, would incur many problems and pose challenges about the corporate, the business forms in the United States. So they often be the culprit to pay the tax. However, we have some concept between online and offline transaction about the international commerce. So the United States is a party who agreed on a non-taxation of online transaction. However, in domestic concept, that comes in sort of different. So Professor Walton points to that some maleficent point, which may lead to improper dealings about tax consequences. And also, he urged some of important concepts, often recognized in long tradition of the United States business entity law. So fiduciary duty involved in partnership should be some of a penetrating value to remedy the kind of ill operation of web businesses. How do you consider and assess? Very interesting. And also, he stressed that evil aspect by illustrating a music sharing. NAFTA, have you ever subscribed to context of peer sharing of music? So it infringes, in basic concept of law, the intellectual property rights, and also the context may aggravate in the scope of an online business transaction. So, and also the vitality of international trade now sees some of the high frequency of joint venture agreement over the global jurisdictions. So the companies who have a capitals may invest in countries in the form of a joint venture agreement. So the labor may be supplied in a cheaper price, and they have some great opportunity to find a fine match between a capital, technology, and labor. So joint venture agreement is often employed predominantly to address the international trade list. And in that case, what a form of business entity would be more effective to embed the kind of fiduciary or duty concept or a value? How do you proceed? So also his point is, if ULLE is a party of a joint venture agreement, then their ethics or a business value may be exchanged in some context. However, it is binding on the other party who has different ethics or originated from a different tradition about what a fiduciary duty was. So the history and tradition comes rather saliently from his version of current online businesses. And he also saw the lack of a federal response, which would be a patchwork to instantly deal with in ad hoc context the problems and fatal miscarriage of a large forms, for example, and loan for other the malicious actors, large in the form of large business enterprises, as a principal driver to motivate a federal patchwork in response. And it considers it not to be a reform in fashion, since many factors and problems involved in the context. Also, a federal law on a limited liability entity would not be maturated in this stage. And also, Wyoming, particularly the state, to respond with a specific business needs with a Mexico, allow the state to adopt the Limited Liability Entity Act. However, that will not be the case for rest of the states in the United States, and also make them weaker to bring what they come of regulated into the kind of a federal scale. How do you consider? Very helpful, and also pertinent to our deliberation involving trade regulations. So I expect all of you have been benefited. So, and United States has a thick system about export regulations. You now being available various institutions. For example, Export Administration Act, EAA, and also Export Control Classification Number System, Commerce Control List idea, and Bureau of Industry and Security as a responsible actor, and also Commerce Country Chart, the concept of general license, shippers export, and individual validated license concept for certain products and for export to certain countries. And the government also may grant a special comprehensive license to exporters it deems to be experienced and knowledgeable. So the primary federal law concerning exports is the Export Administration. Adopted in 1979, the purpose of the EAA was to balance the need to facilitate growth in export trade with national security interests. The EAA provides two reasons for the need for U.S. export controls. Initially, export controls are to be implemented to prevent significant contribution to the military potential of any state that will prove detrimental to the U.S. national security interest. Second, export controls are to further U.S. foreign policy objectives or fulfill international obligations. So it is a prime instrumentality to enforce the system of sanction against evil states, enemy states in some cases, rogue states. EA expired on June 30th, 1994. Its substantive provisions and related regulations were extended in Executive Order 12924, issued on August 19th, 1994 by President Clinton, who concluded the expiration of the EAA and resultant absence of export controls presented an unusual and extraordinary threat to the United States national security, foreign policy, and economy. So, what do you consider the basis of this act? So, as I mentioned, the general exception clause instituted MFAs, WTO, would offer the exception about duties and obligations. This measure, based on Export Control Act, will contradict in principle with the terms of WTO law, since it relies on the concept of a free trade. It obstructs, as a matter of a practical force and legal institution, the free trade. However, it is allowed, since the interest of national security overwhelms the trade economy. You see? And also public morals or health or safety standards are kind of the class of excuses you see in the general exception. President George W. Bush extended the EAA and its regulations by Executive Order 13222, issued on August 17, 2001. The EAA is now extended annually by presidential notice published in the Federal Register. So often the context share the same process. The president often has wide leeway about shaping and implementing a trade policy, since it requires very strategic agility against many challenges. The statute can be automatically renewed by facilitate process. And also the United States Congress has enacted on the method on fast track procedure. So the lesser process is shown in brief to enable a more speedier reaction or response against the national trade laws. You see, so I forgot to draw the class chart. So I suppose you have to report to another class. So can you write down your name on the sheet? May separate through the peer students. The EAA and its regulations are applicable to 4 separate types of transactions. Initially, the EAA applies to the export of commodities and technical data from the United States. Second, the EAA is applicable to the re-export of U.S. origin commodities and technical data to foreign countries. The export and re-export from a foreign country of products with U.S. origin, parts, is also subject to the EAA. Finally, the export and re-export from a foreign country of products based on U.S. technical data is governed by the EAA. The EAA established several grounds for the imposition of export controls. For example, the President may impose export controls for national security reasons. The President enjoys broad discretion in this regard, and his decision does not need to satisfy mandatory criteria but is based on extensive findings of fact. The President may also impose export controls for foreign policy reasons. Okay. Thank you for your assistance. And also, so the control is likely to achieve its intended foreign policy purpose. control is compatible with U.S. foreign policy objectives. The reaction of other countries is not likely to achieve, is not likely to render the control ineffective. The effect of control on U.S. industry does not exceed the foreign policy benefits. The control is capable of effective enforcement. Adequate consultation has occurred with industry, Congress, and U.S. allies, and all restrictive alternatives have been exhausted. So, a plethora of preconditions were prescribed in the statute, and often they are not practically problematic. Of course, in the previous case, we see some controversy about the exact nature of a war involving Iraq, and as aftermath about democratization of nation. However, in significant consideration, they would not involve a legal constitution considered. In this context, the controversy could be raised, and actually was raised in terms of interbranch operation in U.S. Constitution. United States Congress is actually possess the power to prove legitimate war. War making also is actually split in the scheme of U.S. Constitution. So the President is required to obtain the consent of Congress. However, practically that could not be realistic and may forego to meet the urgency of a war situation. The EAA also make it illegal for U.S. companies to comply with or support any boycott, primary or secondary, forced or imposed by a foreign country against the U.S. ally. A primary boycott is a refusal to engage in direct trade with the target state. By contrast, a secondary boycott is a refusal to engage in trade with state, directed trade with the target state. Primary responsibility for the administration and enforcement of U.S. export control resides with the Bureau of Industry and Security. Located within the Department of Commerce, BIS is the successor to the former Bureau of Export Administration, which it replaced in April 2002. The mission of BIS is to advance U.S. national security, foreign policy, and economic interests. This mission is advanced in part through regulating the export of sensitive goods and technologies and the enforcement of export control and anti-boycott laws. BIS has 4 separate bureaus. Export Administration has 4 offices: non-proliferation and treaty compliance, national security and technology transfer, export services, and strategic industry and economic security. Export enforcement also has 4 offices: export enforcement, intelligence and field support, analysis, and anti-boycott compliance. Other BIS offices include the Office of Chief Counsel for Industry and Security and Office of International Programs. The first question every U.S. exporter must answer is whether the merchandise it seeks to send abroad requires a BIS export license. So license requirements are critical. And the exporter must determine whether the merchandise has a specific export control classification number. So this number describes a particular good or type of good and shows the controls imposed on its export. So the export control classification number are set forth on the Commerce Control List, which has 10 broad categories of goods: nuclear materials, chemicals, microorganisms and toxins, materials processing, electronics, computers, and telecommunications, sensors, lasers, navigation, marine, and propulsion system. So you can weigh in good sense the nature of a product, often sensitive. So you see some of a controversy now, endured and even expanded in civil context, chemical weapons. And now North Korea is alleged to be one of a nation involved in this context, the chemical development, chemicals is threatening and also inhumane, as you see in newspaper scenes and others. Once the exporter has obtained an ECCN, the merchandise must be cross-referenced with the Commerce Country Chart. The SSN and a Commerce Country Chart define goods subject to export controls based on technical specifications and the country of ultimate destinations. And the United States controls the exportation of goods by issuing 3 types of export license. What are those? First is a general license. It is a grant of authority to all exporters for certain types of goods. Exporters do not have to apply for a general license because authorization to export is automatically granted through the EAA and its associated administrative regulations. So the risk posed in the context of general license is fairly lesser and often submissive to basic framework of a free trade liberalization. So automatically processed to be granted about general license. And in limited instances, and depending upon the applicability of the ECCN, sorry, ESSN is what representative is post-media, broadcasting media. ECCN means, what is that? Export control classification number. The Commerce Control List and Commerce Country Guide. An export must obtain individually validated license for certain products and for export to certain countries. An IVL, individually validated license, grants authority to a specific exporter to export specific products to a specific destination for a limited period of time, usually 2 years. So the control is rather restrictive and imposing to follow through the specifics of dealings. BIS may also grant a special comprehensive license to exporters it deems to be experienced in knowledge of. The SCL substitutes for an IBL for shipments by exporters who participate in export and re-export transactions on a routine basis. So we now see time is up, and I'd like to let you know about the information on midterm exam. So I would impose an alternative as a report. So you see a brief research report suffice your requirement. How do you agree? Is it acceptable? Research report, 3 or 4 pages. About topic you can freely choose within the scope we dealt with in class discussion. Or then you may raise the topic, for example, CISG, basic principle of CISG. Then you may present some more brief description about this principle and other aspects, including your opinion, comments, and some thoughts about its merits and some comparative viewpoint or policy suggestions. Is it okay? So I'll make it clear in written form. So you're advised to keep on a public notice board in this law department, you see? So, okay, that'll be all. And the cases were left to wait for next class. So we'll go on that topic in the next class. Thank you for your attention. See you in the next class.